I'm Peter with ProLifeNews.tv and NationalProLifeRadio.net, and I'm standing with Scott Klusendorf. And you're a pro-lifer that's been on the road for quite a while. You've traveled the country and had a lot to say. If you had to say what you do to people who've never seen you before, what would you say?
Well, Peter, what I do is equip people to defend the pro-life view persuasively using scientific arguments and philosophic arguments.
And you provide information services, I assume, to
That's
do that.
correct. Yeah, I do training seminars. Our website, prolifetraining.com, gives people the tools, the thought they need to make that case for life with people they work with, people they worship with, and people they go to school with.
And how long have you been working in the pro-life area and helping people with this kind of
This is my 17th year, actually. I've been at this quite some time and continue to learn and enjoy it more and more.
And what brought you into this?
That's a great question, Peter. I was a minister for 5 years prior to starting pro-life work. And I was at a conference where a speaker gave a talk on abortion. And though the conference was sparsely attended, there was only a handful of us there who were ministers, the speaker, thankfully, gave a very persuasive defense of the pro-life view and showed images of what abortion does to the unborn. And those pictures absolutely floored me. And it got me into this movement because before I'd been playing at being pro-life, now I was animated to do something.
So before that, you really not only were not involved, it really wasn't on your mind.
It wasn't on my mind at all, and until I heard Greg Cunningham speak, who was a former member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and heard him speak and give that presentation with those images, I was nominally pro-life. I believed the pro-life position, but I wasn't doing anything much to address the issue, and it was that presentation that launched me into what I'm doing today.
And you say it was the pictures. I assume we're talking graphic pictures.
Exactly. Because a lot of people look at prenatal development pictures and they go, oh, yeah, that's nice. But until you see it for what it is, you see abortion and what it does to the unborn, you may be persuaded about the humanity of the unborn, but you won't be persuaded about the inhumanity of abortion. And that's a key issue we have to help people understand.
And that's one thing those pictures do.
Those pictures do. And they need to be used carefully. I'm not talking about ramming them in people's faces. We always give a warning. We tell people that there's coming a presentation that's hard to look at. And when I'm speaking in front of an audience, I tell them exactly what they're going to see. And then they don't complain. Then they don't feel like we're beating up on them. And we also make it very clear that we're not there to condemn people who may have sinned on the issue of abortion. We're there to convey truth. And the images help us do that. And it's really no different than what you see in historical films like Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List or The Passion of the Christ that graphically depict historical events. And even though those images are disturbing, they convey truth in a way words alone never could. And that's why we use the images.
They do speak for themselves.
They really do.
And there are various events around the country that take place, like the Face the Truth Tour in the summer, and I went out with Jack Ames and we did a whole week on the road and 3 places a day. And
right.
The signs are what we use during that time. It's a Face the Truth tour, and we show people the signs of what abortion looks like.
Right.
And people come at us and they yell at us for doing it.
Right.
People really get upset about it, and I often tell them I don't want to see them either.
Right.
I'm standing here holding something I don't want to look at.
Exactly right. And nobody likes to see these images. But Dr. Martin Luther King used images of black men being lynched by white racists to make the case that there was injustice in the culture. And I remember the situation, hearing about the situation, I should say, in 1955, where that 14-year-old boy, Emmett Till, a black African-American boy from Chicago, was killed by a man and his friend simply because he smiled and innocently flirted with a white woman. And they killed him and literally made a mess of him for 3 hours before actually finishing him off. And when his mother had the funeral for this 14-year-old boy, she insisted on an open casket funeral, even though it offended people to see it, because the image of her boy, she said, was what was needed to change the injustice. And her exact words were, yes, it's disturbing to see this, but I want the whole world to see what they did to my boy. And I think as pro-lifers, unless we open the casket on abortion, this nation will continue to tolerate an injustice it never has to look at.
Sure. Well, it's been since, we say decriminalized. Abortion's been decriminalized since 1973, so 34 years later, we're still fighting this battle. And sometimes it feels like there really aren't that many people out there that are actually fighting the battle. There are very few people in the trenches. And what do you say? This is sort of one of the segments that I do is, where you could just look at the camera and look at the people out there and tell them what do they need to do to help us in the field, and what can they do to participate in helping us?
Well, first of all, we need to equip ourselves to engage. If you go to prolifetraining.com, you can get articles that I've written that will help you make the case for life, whether we're talking about embryonic stem cell research, cloning, abortion. These are topics we address there. And most people think that these are complex issues and, I'm not going to know what to say when I'm pressed with a hard question. It's amazing how if you can learn to simplify the issue and just make a few scientific and philosophic points, you're in the driver's seat and you're well on your way to making a case that could help change someone's mind. Now, I think it's important we remember the goal is not necessarily to convert people on the spot. I'd rather do what a colleague of mine puts real well. He says, put a pebble in their shoe. Give them something to think about. And I think my friend Greg Kokel, who came up with that illustration, is right on the money. Arguments aren't won on the spot. They're won a couple of weeks later when that person you were talking to is sitting alone in the drive-thru at McDonald's, and they realize that guy made good points, and I didn't have good answers to him.
Yeah.
That's when you start to realize that, hey, the difference is made in that person's thinking has now been rearranged.
Not so much bombarding a person
No.
and converting them on the spot. And
dragging them down to the altar, and I see the light, and, here I come. No, it's...
But the pebble in the shoe is something that just always
exactly.
kind of...
It's going to wear on them
feel
until
they
they deal
hear it,
with it.
they know it. Yeah.
Exactly.
That
And
makes
that's
sense,
the key.
yeah.
That's really the key we're aiming for here. So
yeah.
Drop a pebble in their shoe. Give them something to think about.
Well, one of the... out in the field when we're doing either gaps or anything like that, one of the things I talk about, and what I try to get people that are really debating this to admit is that they're talking about a child. Because the arguments of the old, where they would say clump of cells, that's not even discussed anymore.
No.
I don't even hear people say clump of cells anymore. They just say, yeah, it's a child, so what?
Right.
It's my choice. So doesn't that make you feel like, wow, we're at that point where it's so cold and we're admitting it's a human being. Now we're arguing whether or not the human being has a right to live.
Well, a lot of people say they don't care if it's a human being, they'll kill it anyway, but I don't know that we should always believe that they're serious about their claim. There are people, though, who say, hey, you know what, a woman has absolute right to bodily autonomy, and even if it is a human being, she doesn't have to give up her body to support another if she doesn't want to do it. But that claim for absolute bodily autonomy falls apart when we really start thinking about it. Say, for example, you are a physician and a woman comes to you who's pregnant. She says, I'm suffering from morning sickness and I want to take thalidomide to ease my nausea symptoms. Well, as a physician, you wouldn't prescribe that because you know it can result in unbelievably horrendous birth defects. But what if she takes it anyway behind your back and then gives birth to a child a few months later that has no arms? Well, we would think she did a terrible thing. But wait a minute. If a woman has absolute bodily autonomy, she can do whatever she wants with that fetus in her womb, including grow it to about the 8-month stage and then have it dissected for medical research. Or let's even take it a step further. It's time for the child to be born. And she just decides, no, I'm not letting it pass through my cervical cavity. It's my body, and I'm not going to grant it a right to trespass beyond a certain point. It's going to stay there. Now, assuming that child could remain in miniature form, the argument would entail, then, that she had a right to do that simply because she has absolute bodily autonomy. But we know better. This does not square with our intuitions at all.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of good information, and I think people will probably benefit from coming to your site. And
would love to have them come.
What's the domain again?
prolifetraining.com.
Okay, prolifetraining.com. This is ProLifeNews.tv and National Pro-Life Radio, and I'm Peter Shin, and this has been an interview with Scott Klusendorf. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Peter.